On WNIN Lawmakers this week, our guest is Indiana State Representative Wendy McNamara. We'll be talking about what's been happening during the Indiana General Assembly session so far this year as Indiana moves forward with vaccination efforts. That's coming up next on WNIN Lawmakers. Welcome to the program. I'm John Gibson, Morning Edition host for WNIN FM. Today our guest is Indiana State Representative Wendy McNamara. Before we begin our conversation, here's a quick update from Indianapolis. Indiana Public Broadcasting's Brandon Smith reports on the week at the State House.
There were several significant GOP amendments on the Senate floor to a bill dealing with the governor's emergency authority, but Republicans allowed almost none of them to be called up for debate, instead making minor tweaks to the legislation. That came just days after Governor Eric Holcomb placated many lawmakers by announcing he would repeal all statewide COVID-19 restrictions beginning April 6th. The Senate also gave final approval this week to a bill that tightens up penalties for people who knowingly provide false information on unemployment benefit applications. The new bill, which only needs the governor's signature to become law, could penalize those people even if they didn't end up receiving any benefits. And House Republicans used legislative procedure to block debate and a vote on a Democratic amendment to create a nonpartisan redistricting system. In a maneuver used frequently by legislative majorities, the House GOP ruled that the amendment wasn't relevant to a bill on election laws. For Indiana Public Broadcasting, I'm Brandon Smith at the State House.
As Brandon mentioned in his report, Governor Eric Holcomb outlined Indiana's return to normalcy plan this week. With a look at what that includes, here's WNIN's Nolan Barnett.
Tuesday, Governor Holcomb addressed the state detailing the extension of the public health emergency currently in place.
Our current state public health emergency and COVID executive order expire on March 31st. I will renew the public health emergency for another 30 days. The current COVID restrictions will be extended as is through April 5th.
And with that comes a date as to when decisions can be made locally about capacity restrictions.
Starting on April 6th, all decisions about venue capacity will be in the hands of local officials. 6 feet of spacing between tables and other seating will still be recommended, as is spacing between non-household parties. Social distancing is still recommended.
Extra shipments of vaccines is allowing Indiana to expand its eligibility.
Our federal partners told states to expect large increases in the amount of vaccine that will be flowing to us beginning the last week in March. On Wednesday, March 31st, we'll plan to open up vaccine eligibility to all Hoosiers 16 years and older, anticipating we'll receive additional doses of all 3 vaccines.
With vaccines becoming available to all residents in Indiana 16 or older, Holcomb tells us what a lot of Hoosiers have been waiting to hear.
On April 6th, the face covering mandate will become a state mask advisory. The State Department of Health will continue to provide county metrics each week, color-coded, which are key to knowing whether virus levels are increasing or decreasing locally.
Evansville Mayor Lloyd Winnicky plans to give an update of his own following what the governor outlined on the 23rd. And with news of a closer return to normalcy, on Wednesday, Dr. Christina Box warned that we're not completely out of the clear.
I want to caution Hoosiers that this pandemic is far from over. We're still seeing new cases of COVID each and every day, and we're watching what's happening in Europe with the B.1.1.7 variant closely. More than 1.4 million Hoosiers under the age of 16 are not eligible because none of these 3 vaccines have been authorized for younger people.
If you're not yet vaccinated, you can sign up by visiting ourshot.in.gov or by calling 211. For WNIN, I'm Nolan Barnett.
And our guest today is State Representative Wendy McNamara. Representative McNamara, thank you so much for joining us via Skype.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, let's begin with what we were just hearing about there. Indiana is opening up its vaccine eligibility. Governor Holcomb is replacing the mask mandate with a mask advisory on April 6th. Local officials will still make decisions about capacity restrictions and such. Do you think April 6th is a good date to do that, or do you feel it's too soon?
I like the fact that they've given the locals the authority to make decisions for what's best in their area. I wind up with people on both sides of the issue, those people that favor continuing the mask mandates and those that are strongly opposed to it. So I like the fact that the restrictions from the state level, which we've been asking for to be released, are now lifted, and you can now have it locally controlled. Several mayors have come out and said they will continue with the mask mandates. We'll see what happens in Evansville and in other cities. But for now, April 6th will be the date that locally controlled decisions will take place.
Yes, as you mentioned, I believe the mayor of Indianapolis says he's going to keep his mask mandate in place for a while. We've yet to hear from Mayor Winnecke here in Evansville, but I guess as you see it, it's good to not have a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. I mean, rural versus metro, for example.
The interesting thing that we've grappled with was the response was different in every county, depending on who your health department agency person might have been. In some areas of the state, it went very smoothly. I believe it did here. In other areas of the state, it did not. But you have the opportunity now for the local decisions to be made, I think, where people are more in tune with what's happening in their community versus the top-down approach.
Now, of course, this is spring break time of year, and obviously quite a few folks have traveled to other places during spring break. Are you concerned at all that there could be, a spike in cases, or maybe some of the variants that are out there might make things go the other way?
People have decided to get out and go experience life again. Depending on where they went to, I think the risks are just the same as when they come back. So that'll be, telling to us in the next few weeks of if there is a spike or if there isn't. But again, a lot of people in the state of Indiana have moved towards getting vaccinations. So I think that will help in the outcomes. But, Hoosiers are, for lack of a better word, we've been hunkered down for over a year, and I don't blame those folks who want to get out in spring break and enjoy themselves, but I've also seen a lot of people do it responsibly. So, I think the mental health aspect of having the break will far outweigh the potential fear of a spike that might occur when they return.
Yeah. What would it take for some of these state restrictions to come back? I mean, what kind of spike would we have to see before you would support maybe putting some of these statewide restrictions back in place?
But to be honest, I'm a co-author of House Bill 1123, which allows the legislature to bring ourselves back if necessary, so that we can really have some say in what's going on in the state of Indiana due to emergency orders and that sort of thing. And that's not saying that Governor Holcomb didn't do the best that he could under circumstances, because nobody prepares for a pandemic. But it was often said that the legislature felt like we were left out of the decision-making process as we proceeded through it. So when House Bill 1123, I believe it's on thirds, possibly in the Senate, will give us the opportunity to come back and address issues that we were unable to really have an input in across the last year.
Yeah. You mentioned vaccinations. Indiana's 1 millionth Hoosier was vaccinated this past week. Are you encouraged by those numbers? And can we ask you, have you yourself been vaccinated?
Sure. Many people might not know, but my father passed away due to COVID in December. My sister is still struggling with the after effects. She's still on oxygen from November. Her lungs were severely damaged. Out of respect to people who have lived through it, and those that we have lost, I got vaccinated.
Right.
But to be honest, ultimately, it's a decision up to the individual person. I don't believe in mandating vaccines. I believe that of goodwill, if a person chooses to vaccinate themselves for the greater good, then they should. But if a person chooses not to vaccinate themselves, I don't think they should be mandated to.
Okay, and also we want to certainly send along our condolences. I know your family has been through a rough time there. Let's talk about what's happening in Indianapolis right now, a big event, March Madness. Indiana is hosting the entire men's basketball tournament. How is that going with the COVID restrictions in place? Do you feel that it's being done safely up there in the state capitol?
It was exciting to see people downtown again. It has been a ghost town the entire session. You wouldn't see anybody out on the streets. And I ran into a person in the elevator from Iowa, and I asked him, how is Indianapolis treating you? And he said, this is the best place I've ever been. It is a fabulous place to visit. Everybody's been so welcoming and open. It really spoke volumes to the preparations that were made in Indianapolis to bring the NCAA there. The teams are restricted to their hotel only. Mm-hmm. They can go to the games and they can come back, and that's it. So they aren't going to be mingling with the general public. The other night, I took a walk out with my nephew around town and observed people just being respectful, distancing, and the businesses there were, in one case, they had a 40-minute wait. We haven't experienced that in years. So it was pretty exciting to see the energy back downtown in Indianapolis.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't have to tell you that this is a budget session of the Indiana General Assembly. That's sort of the big task at hand for the legislature. How has the budget process been going since the last time we chatted?
I think it's been pretty smooth. Generally, you hear a lot of bickering back and forth between the House and Senate on the particular issues that they might want versus what we might want. And as I understand it, obviously I'm not involved in the conversations on an intimate level that are going on in the Senate, but I'm hopeful that we're going to be wrapping up those conversations here and actually might get out of session early this year. Mm-hmm.
Just to do a quick reset here, this is Lawmakers. I'm John Gibson. My guest today is State Representative Wendy McNamara. Well, let's talk about some of the bills that are going through the General Assembly this session. House Bill 1156 prohibits companies from requiring their employees to be microchipped. Representative McNamara, you, along with 90 other representatives, voted against it. Can you tell us why and basically what was this bill all about?
Voted against the bill or voted for the bill?
You voted against the bill, correct?
I'm not sure. I can't. That was a.
Okay, I believe as I'm saying here, I believe you voted for the bill. Is what I believe. There's a typo on my sheet here, but I believe you voted for that one. Is this something that's happening anywhere? Is this something you're concerned about?
The bill actually came up last year and came back this year. That's why I was surprised if I would have opposed it because I thought I supported it. Yeah, actually, some companies out in California and Oregon are microchipping their employees as a condition of employment. And I don't think you should have to walk around with a data chip in your hand to show that you're a willing employee in that particular company. So absolutely, we carry around ID cards, we carry around various other things, but I think it's true invasion into your body if you have to be microchipped to work for somebody.
Right, and as you mentioned earlier, you don't support mandating vaccinations, so I guess it's no surprise you wouldn't support a mandate of that kind.
Correct.
Right, okay. Well, as Brandon mentioned in his report earlier, House Democrats were blocked from amending a bill to give the responsibility of drawing new district lines to a nonpartisan state agency. We've talked about this a little bit before. What are your thoughts on the whole redistricting process? And would you like to see some sort of a nonpartisan approach?
As we've talked over the last 10 years probably, and is always a conversation nationwide, not just in Indiana, because redistricting occur every 10 years. In Indiana, it's a constitutional process. It's the responsibility of the state legislature to do the redistricting. Simple as that. And to send it out to somebody else is, in my opinion, not doing what we've been constitutionally obligated to do. So I voted against the amendment, or sorry, I didn't vote against the amendment, but had the amendment made it through, I probably would not have supported it, just for the mere fact that we have a constitutional responsibility to redistrict, and I want to maintain that authority in our hands.
And of course, the party that's in power will have that power. Currently, Republicans obviously have a supermajority. So I'm guessing that, did that influence your thoughts on that?
No, it's our obligation to make sure that we do it, and that's simply it.
All right, well, let's talk about a few other bills that are happening. I understand you authored House Bill 1200. It modifies the definition of a protected person in relation to human trafficking. Can you tell us about this bill a little bit? What is the purpose of it?
Sure. Since my tenure in the legislature, I've always carried a lot of human trafficking legislation. And at the end of last session, there was a bill that was asked to be studied during the interim. And it came through my interim study committee in the fall. And so I asked my policy people, what is left in human trafficking to try to end this in the state of Indiana? Mm-hmm. And that's what that bill is. It's going to be heard either next week or the week after in the Senate. So that's coming up. And I look forward to its passage. But we want to do everything we can to discourage and punish those people who wish to traffic humans in the state of Indiana.
How would this bill change our current laws on human trafficking?
The definition of a protected person allows for people under the 18, even more enhancements if you've been trafficked. A lot of times when we think of human trafficking victims that focus on the sexual nature of it, there are also people that are labor trafficked. I got involved in this really primarily back in 2012 when we hosted the Super Bowl and carried the legislation at that time. It's a multi-billion-dollar industry worldwide, and some of these things that they do to juveniles in the state of Indiana is heinous, and I want to make sure they pay. It clarifies some of the current law that exists, and then it enhances others if the person is under 18. So hopefully it will close any remaining gaps that we might have and make Indiana the most unfriendly place for somebody wishing to traffic another human.
Yeah. Well, let's move on to another bill here, a bill that you authored, as I understand it, House Bill 1198. It's been on the state Senate floor this week. Can you tell us a little bit about that one? Basically, what would it do? What does it attempt to accomplish?
Yeah, that bill actually came to us from a Supreme Court decision last summer. The Supreme Court said that they don't have jurisdiction over juvenile sex crimes, and in this specific case, child molesting. Mm-hmm. That one's a pretty complicated one to explain, to try to say, but what we're trying to do is if somebody who between the ages of 14 and 18 is accused of child molesting, but now they are past the age of 21, mm-hmm. and the victim comes forward or DNA evidence shows that this individual committed this crime as a juvenile, it actually establishes jurisdiction so that person can be held accountable or, go to trial. Basically, the juvenile court says we don't have jurisdiction of this person after they turn 21.
Right.
But with the increase of DNA evidence and victims typically remembering things later or however that might transpire, this accounts for the jurisdiction piece of trying child molestation committed by a juvenile, but after they're 21.
Right, I see. Well, it's while we're talking about things regarding crime and punishment, another House Bill 1202 deals with sentencing, as I understand it. It provides some relief to inmate sentences depending on the crime they committed before July 1st of 2014. That bill is seeing some bipartisanship. Can you tell us essentially what that bill would do?
Sure, that bill will be heard in a couple weeks as well. Mm-hmm. And I imagine it's going to be amended. I don't want it to be amended, but I assume that it will be. So prior to July 1st of 2014, in the state of Indiana, we had one type of criminal code that had certain sentences attached to it. And people had to spend at least 50% of that time in jail. Mm-hmm. After July 1st of 2014, the new criminal code went into place. Those individuals have to serve 75% of their time in jail, but they often had shorter sentences. Mm-hmm. So that bill would allow anybody who is arrested, which right now is about 1,600 people in the state of Indiana, arrested prior to July 1st of 2014, the opportunity to seek parole if they have already served 75% of the sentence had they been arrested, charged, and sentenced after July 1st of 2014.
I see. As you said, that bill is now in the Senate. Some changes might be added.
Yeah, it's only for nonviolent offenders. Most of it is related to drug crimes and those sort of things. They can't have had any violent offense in their history, like domestic battery, domestic violence, battery on a police officer, are charged with it. What the hiccup is, those people prior to 2014 might have what's called a fixed sentence, which means that they did a plea agreement and agreed that they would spend 25 years in jail. The judge didn't make that decision. Nobody made that decision. The individual themselves, by signing an agreement, they would spend that much time in jail. Right. And that's probably where we'll see the amendment because there's some pushback that if you signed a contract agreeing to stay that time, right, you shouldn't have the opportunity for parole early.
Yeah. All right. Well, we will see how that one progresses through the state Senate. Let's get back into education a little bit. I believe we talked with you last time about House Bill 1008, creating a student learning recovery program. Obviously, many students have been doing their classes online this past year. It was referred to the Senate and now has been referred to a committee on appropriations. Can you dive into that a little more? Basically, what will that do and what's the status right now?
Sure. I authored a lot of bills this year, and
yes, you did.
Most of them have found their way to law. So House Bill 1008 is actually on second reading in the Senate on Monday. It passed appropriations 13-0 this week. And what it'll provide for is $150 million in what we're calling the Learning Recovery Grant. And it's going to be available to school corporations, retired teachers, boys and girls clubs, and Mount Vernon I frequently refer to Thrive, which is a partnership with the Civil Air Patrol. What will happen is we're trying to fill that gap that was caused due to COVID. Any type of learning loss that might have had a child fall behind in class, be at a grade lower in class, missed out on some of the statistics probably that would be helpful. They feel that kids have probably lost nearly 190 days of math instruction or are that far behind just due to COVID alone, and that would be your average student. English is a little bit less. So this bill is an attempt to put resources back into our community for summer programs that will help fill in that gap due to to the learning loss created by COVID. The entities that would be interested, they're going to apply to the Department of Education. They'll create a learning plan, and from there, the DOE will decide or determine who will get the grants. One of the big things in it is if you're a school corporation or entity that receives government funds, you have to spend those funds first before you can actually receive and spend these funds. That's because there are millions and millions and millions of dollars coming to the state of Indiana for education.
Right.
And they want to make sure that this money would go to organizations and groups that wouldn't necessarily qualify for the federal grants.
Right. Well, here's I guess a somewhat mysterious bill. It's called House Bill 1164, focusing on various utility matters. It passed the House back in February, 54-39. As I understand it, you voted against the bill. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What basically would it have done, and why did you vote against it?
I don't recall that
Don't
bill.
recall that one?
We've had a lot of utility bills go through, but I can't remember what that particular bill was about.
Okay, House Bill 1164. We'll do a little more digging, and perhaps we can chat about it next time. Well, we have just a couple of minutes left here. Are there some other measures you'd like to talk about that we haven't touched on here?
Sure. Just want to give a shout out to our local Evansville Police Department. I authored a bill, House Bill 1201, which will allow for emergency canines to be transported via ambulance to the closest emergency vet in case a canine is injured in the line of duty. Mm-hmm. EPD Officer Mark Saltzman helped me with that. And Senate Bill 79 that I heard this week, I'm the sponsor of, is a domestic violence bill. Mm-hmm. Shout out to EPD Officer Matt Pargas for coming up and helping me amend that bill to include protective orders and no contact orders in domestic violence situations and enhance those. But probably one of the biggest bills, but most complicated bills to explain this session that will have the biggest impact on Hoosiers is my House Bill 1199. And that bill will allow Hoosiers to have licenses suspended due to administrative action, meaning I didn't show up for court, so they suspended my license. I didn't have insurance, so they suspended my license. It'll allow them the opportunity to have their driver's license suspension lifted if they can show proof of future financial responsibility. And what that means is if they can prove that they're going to get the insurance and they maintain that insurance for at least 180 days, their suspension will be lifted. It also has a huge impact on people who are on parole or probation.
Right.
It allows for job training, and it also allows for the reinstatement fees to be waived if the person who's coming off of probation or parole enrolls in a job training program. So
all right, we will have to leave it there. I'm afraid we are out of time. State Representative Wendy McNamara, thank you so much for joining us via Skype.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we'll be back in a few weeks after a break for Easter. I'm John Gibson of WNIN FM. Thanks for joining us for WNIN Lawmakers.